Welcome to 4.5 Men. This is your host Steven with Ryan, Brian, and Jerry. Our half man Eric is not going to be joining the podcast tonight. It's a little late down in Florida, but I do want to say we have a guest with us, Mr. Terrance Massey. I know Terrance for a while now. I used to work with him at the YMCA, my local YMCA over here. And today's topic, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, policing, and social issues related to that. I do want to mention that Terrance is an African-American male, and the rest of us are of pretty much, Caucasian descent. So we felt like it was important to bring on, an African-American, especially talking about this topic. So thank you, Terrance, for being on the show with us today.
Yep.
So we're going to kind of kick this off with, a little Q&A. And the whole goal behind the Q&A is that we kind of want to ask those questions that essentially white people are afraid to ask or know from, I guess you could say, fear of offense, if that makes sense. And then we can kind of tailor off the conversation from there. So one of the biggest, things, Terrance, that I feel like a lot of people have trouble with is the whole Black Lives Matter kind of versus the police thing, okay? And I feel like the emphasis is on the verses and everybody that backs them up. So I kind of just want to hear where you stand with all of that and your thoughts and your opinions and everything else.
What do you mean, like, versus? Like how is...
Like the whole blue lives and the black lives type of deal.
Because it's not like an anti-police thing. It's not really about that. That's other people spinning it into that. Because obviously they're talking about police brutality and whatnot is one of the major things they talk about. So people are going to spin it to make it seem like they're saying like they're anti-cops. That's not what it is at all.
Okay, that's definitely fair enough. So what about the cops, though, that don't uphold that honor when dealing with the person of color?
So you mean cops that don't do their job?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, they need to be dealt with like anybody. Like, if you don't do your job, What happens? You get fired.
You already know what happens,
exactly.
Right?
That needs to happen to the cops.
So let me ask you this then. How do you start holding those police accountable outside of the actual police force, if that makes sense? Because we're all sitting here calling like, hey, all the good cops need to hold the bad cops accountable, or people have been saying there's no good cops until they expose all the bad cops. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just know your rights. Know what police can and can't do to you. That's not even just for black people. That's for everybody.
Yeah.
100%.
I
know they're trying to do stop and frisk in Joliet. That shit is super illegal.
It's illegal, yeah.
That is super illegal.
Yeah.
But in New York, that's how a lot of black people got locked up, is with stop and frisk.
Yeah.
So most importantly, I think you just need to know your rights.
Because at the end of the day, you could have one police officer who may not like you for whatever reason, and if it is stop and frisk or whatever the case may be, even if you don't break the law, they could essentially have an effect, on the rest of your life just because they have a certain agenda. Very true.
Yeah.
So Terrance, how do you feel then, when you maybe come across a social media post or something like that and you see someone justifying the actions of a police officer against a person of color? What are your thoughts, your feelings? Where do you sit on that, I guess you could say, seesaw?
I mean, if it's somebody I know, it's definitely disappointing. It's like, damn, you thought this was okay? Like, you thought this cop slamming this dude for no reason was okay?
Yeah.
Like, but if it's just a random video, I'm like, all right, he's a jackass. Like, I just blow it off. But it's hard to justify people not doing their job, and it's on tape. Like, how are you arguing against what we're trying to say? We're just saying, treat us like you would treat anybody else.
And that's the problem, though. The media does portray certain situations, like person to person, as like one way, the other like one way it being okay and one way it being brutality. I think there's definitely brutality. Some cops take it way too far, but I overall think we need to look at situation by situation basis when it comes to like public specific situations, if that makes sense.
Right, kind of like how Jay said, every news station is going to spin it how they want.
They cut their clips the way they want it.
Exactly, because you got the conservatives with Fox, the Democrats with MSNBC, and they all have their own agenda, so they're going to spin it however they want,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever they want to say, their viewers are going to believe. That's why you go on social media, and it's just a complete shit show, people going back and forth, nobody able to find an equal point.
On the videos where like there's no way to spin it. So if you're
Yeah.
just sticking up
Yeah.
for it, then you're just a huge jackass. Like
Yeah.
there's videos
Right.
out there where the cop is clearly wrong,
Yeah.
and if you're just sticking up for that, then
Yeah.
like you're fucking
Yep.
insane.
Yep.
Like, even now,
There's no way to debate that. It's literally on tape. Like that's it.
exactly. Like, even now, I just saw this is from Daily Mail in the United Kingdom. Apparently, LA cops were filmed pointing guns, arresting 3 black teenagers after they actually called the cops on a homeless man who was trying to tag them.
I actually saw that news story as well. I mean, where do you draw the line, though? Because, you know,
Right.
you have police officers that come out and say, oh, I feared for my life. And, you know, that's the excuse every single time.
Yeah.
How do you mitigate or diminish that excuse? Because when you have multiple police officers on one guy and you have 6 people with their guns drawn, I mean, is it really that necessary?
Yeah.
I could see maybe having 2 people having their guns drawn, maybe
Right.
just in case the first guy can't shoot that well.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
why do you have 4 other cops? Those cops should be moving in and, you know, maybe dismantling what's going
Right,
on.
they should
or
be like looking what's happening, not going to like trying to attack somebody.
first
Yeah.
resort. I mean, you got a guy with his hands on his head, you know, fearing
Right.
for their life,
Yeah.
and you
For
got
me,
6 guns
this
pulled.
kind of
Right.
leads to like defunding the police, that topic. But
Yeah.
I would say before we even like talk about that, just retrain the police. Because sometimes the cops escalate the situation. Like they
Yeah.
come to a
Yeah.
domestic dispute, and
It's almost
it's
like
literally just an argument, and the cops
Yeah.
is riling the husband up, and now somebody's going to jail because he's gonna go after the cop, he's gonna go after the woman or whatever.
right, or like you have like the cops who go through like major ego trips when shit like that happens.
Yeah.
So I think that if they're like big man campus, they're gonna like do
Yeah.
whatever they have to stop somebody, and it just goes on. Next thing you know, it's on the news, and we're having.
Yeah.
It's not against the law to hurt a cop's
Yeah.
feelings.
Right.
A lot of
Exactly.
cops
And
don't
their ego
get that.
gets
Like,
hurt.
I can
Yeah.
say whatever I want
Yeah.
to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have the freedom of speech.
Oh, perfect. So glad you said that.
But you don't get to like shoot me because I hurt
Right.
your feelings or crush your ego. Like that's not. How
If
it
somebody
works.
says like, "The fuck are you doing?" Like, you don't get to shoot him in the face.
Yeah,
I guess that's
I can talk to
bullshit.
you however I want
Right,
to.
right.
I can be as rude as I
Cops
want.
don't understand.
That's
it.
your job. That's
Yes,
part of your
they
job.
have a
Right.
job, and
You
they
signed
think
up for that.
right, and they think just because of, like their own personal fears that they could go about like. Oh, the minute they feel like they're even the slightest intimidated,
Yeah.
boom,
Right.
aggression.
Oh, you're not-
no,
you're not
like their job is to
listening,
be patient
Exactly.
and to work through the situation.
Because
not-
that still goes
Yeah.
into the freedom of speech. Because freedom of speech, essentially, only the government can be the ones that
yeah,
let
Yeah.
you speak free, and they're a government-run organization essentially.
Yeah.
That's
What,
like
the police force?
Yeah,
State.
it's run through
Local.
taxes.
I
so
mean,
it's
that's
run through
definitely
state.
local state
local.
for sure.
But it's still,
government.
it's still government, so it's not like a private business where you can go and they can pretty much say like, you
It's
know,
not a
like
task
tax-
force.
Exactly,
No,
like
yeah.
taxes we
Not
can't
a
swear.
fucking
yeah.
private army.
So do you, Terrance, let me ask you this. How do you feel personally as a black person when you deal with the police officer? Let's say you're not even doing something that's, you know,
I hate
illegal.
this
You're just doing whatever you're doing, and you know you're getting questioned, you got stopped or whatever. How do you feel because of your skin color? And I want you to focus on that portion.
And overall, just like from your 24, 25 years of life, your overall experience that you've done.
I mean, I've been pulled over a few times. Some of them were racial profiling. I don't want to get into that because
Yeah.
it's a super long story.
Yeah.
But like,
just overall.
I'm not gonna call the cops honestly because it can go super south. I mean, people got killed just chilling at their
Yeah.
own house
Yeah.
by cops. So if I don't, it's not even the last resort. Like I'm never gonna call the cops.
And in my opinion, that's sad that we have not only just black people and African Americans in this country that feel that way, but you have a whole movement that's essentially kind of moving that direction away from
Calling the cops.
wanting to deal with the police when an issue arises, when a personal issue arises, or you have a confrontation with somebody, whatever the case is. And I feel like that's kind of why there's such this animosity.
Everything you were saying is like referring back to things that are in my head. Because I was gonna say the same thing. It's like when those situations like come about, it's like now there's like such a huge hatred towards policing as well, and it's like even someone new like going to the police force now, like me being like a 25-year-old white man, no matter where I was going, like I'd be fearful now. I'm knowing like I'm a quality person, go like case by case. Yeah, there'd be hatred towards me too. You know what I mean?
Everybody.
Yeah, it's tough.
No, I don't. I wouldn't say I have a negative feeling towards the cops. I just wouldn't call them. I mean, there was cops at one of the rallies I was at there, like, blocking the streets off for us. I didn't say anything crazy to them. I was like, how you doing type shit.
Yeah.
But
So now that we kind of got your gauge on that, when you see videos of these riots and whatever else, and they're going after these police officers and dragging them on the floor, and they're pulling their hair and ripping their vests off and everything else like that, what do you feel internally when you see that those type of actions taking place, essentially against these men and women that are sworn to uphold the law and protect us?
it's bound to happen. I mean, they tried being peaceful, complained about that. So it was not really a lot left for them to do to be heard. So
And when you say
the
that,
conditions for like all the looting and stuff were just perfect. Like everybody's sitting in the house, and then Ahmaud Arbery was first, and then Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
So when we saw that on tape, we're like, all right, you're pissing on us. You're telling us it's rape. Like we literally see you on tape killing this man.
Right.
Like he's not a threat, and you're kneeing on his neck, and you think that's okay. There's people that thought that was okay.
Yeah.
So once that happened, I was like, all right, kind of whatever happens. Yeah. This is you guys. Like you could have stopped it from getting.
So
it,
that's Terrance. That's what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about the whole versus thing, because you, like I said, you have people that absolutely will refuse to see Black Lives Matter side and justify that killing just because they support the blue line. And I'm not saying that necessarily supporting the blue line is the wrong thing to do, especially because all of the relationships with the community is already fragile.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be to that extent. If you're, in my opinion, if you're that prideful about something, you should be able to turn around and say, okay, that's not right. We need to do something to fix that. You should have. It's almost like. I don't want to be too cliche, and I don't want to kind of veer too far off task, but to compare like with a team, like a sports team, if your team is sinking and you're a diehard, fan, or let's say you're a coach of it, what are you going to do with your team?
You're going to fix whatever's wrong.
Right, exactly. You're going to get out the bad seeds that aren't doing what they need to be doing, and you're going to get in the people that are going to put you in a position to succeed.
That's
right.
A lot of the times, the bad seeds are the cops that have been cops for 15 years.
They think they know everything by now, so they feel like I'm in their book.
And you fire those guys, then the younger guys are looking at the department all crazy.
Yeah.
Like, damn, he served 15 years in this one department, and they fired him for literally one thing.
With the media?
So it's political.
Right,
It shouldn't be, but it is.
With the media, etc., like, especially, I feel like everything we look at is always one side or the other. It's like people can't seem to have, like, a 75-25, or just like a small like inner like centrist views, like having different meet in the middle, but it's lean a little bit to one side. But I do feel like what you're saying in regards to the older cops and been cops for a long time, that the younger crowd of people that are coming in, I think, will be a higher percentage of having a more well-rounded mindset. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, they were born during a more progressive time. They literally grew up with this generation that is now fighting for this equality.
Right.
So, we obviously have a lot of friends that even played flag football with us, that have gone to high school with us, that have worked with us, that are, going into the police force, or that are already in the police force. And I honestly trust those people to start making the right decisions, especially when dealing with people of color.
Yeah.
And if I see somebody like, NC, I think you know who I'm talking about, and he's not, and he becomes a cop and he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, I'm going to call his ass out. Because A, he's my boy, and B, kind of like going back to the whole team thing, I'm going to make sure to hold him accountable. Like, that's life. Like, people don't deserve that.
Yep. And it's not to say, obviously, I come from a family of like police officers. And a lot of, so like I know it's not an easy job. It's not like they're all doing everything wrong. Like every situation can be stressful, like high intensity. Like you're gonna make mistakes, but own them. The police department is a huge problem with owning bad decisions
because they don't want to be
right.
They don't want to feel like they're being
That's what I'm saying.
But I feel like especially this generation, since we're like this is pretty much a more progressive generation. I believe we can all agree on that. But we have a chance to fix the police department and everything with that, because look at the last generation. They were raised by the people who caused the 1961 Democratic Convention riots in Chicago. And those people went on to raise the next generation of cops, which is now causing shit we see now. But now we can look at these cops and say, hey, we're going to fix it, and we're going to make it better for those in the future, so we're going to end all this shit for once.
What I think needs to happen, and it just sucks that we live in a country like this, is you hit the pockets of the police departments.
Yeah.
Like they did in Minnesota. The University of Minnesota's like, we're not fucking with
we're not.
police department. You can't come to our campus anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you see they changed up real quick.
Yeah.
That just sucks that we live in such a capitalist country that people are buying out cops.
Yeah.
It's like now they're getting their act together. Like it wasn't them killing that man. It was them losing their contract with the University of Minnesota.
But here's my point with that, and the biggest point is when George Floyd died, and everybody started to essentially gather across the country, and they were protesting or rioting or looting, whatever the hell you want to call it. There was definitely all three forms. You know, a lot of police stations, Kansas City police station, the Flint police station, those are just a few that I can name off the top of my head, went out there, marched with the people, fighted with the people, said, we're with you.
How much of that is a PR stunt?
Exactly. But I even heard like a few times.
What have they done actually to help?
But now here's the thing. You could go and verify this. The whole city of Flint, Michigan, they hired a black police chief, which was huge because the whole entire community there was dismantled between their police and their people, their community. So that was a huge step. And then Flint actually went down a very progressive path. Their crime rate fell through the floor basically.
Yeah.
And when it fell through the floor, the whole incident happened with George Floyd, and then things became pretty, I guess you could say, between both of them. Flint came out, marched with their people. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard a thing about Flint since. So where I was kind of going with that is, and I kind of want to relate this to Chicago, the Chicago Police Department. You have a black mayor who just hired a black essentially police chief, right? That's what he is, right? Or what is it, the superintendent? Superintendent, there you go, right. So,
dude is super fucking crooked, though. I mean the
Chicago
Police Department is the most, one of the most corrupt.
And I would totally agree with you, 110%. And I'm getting there. But you have these people trying to proactively change the police department through some of these proactive changes by, hiring people of color that might see and treat something very differently than a white person would in that same position, right? So my point is, and I'm going to use the Christopher Columbus statue as an example. Mm-hmm. You have a whole bunch of cops standing around that statue. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, people are throwing a whole bunch of shit at them because all they want to do is tear that statue down because of what Christopher Columbus represented and what he did when he came over essentially to North America, right? So my point is, your mayor wants that down.
Did she say she wanted that down?
She's the one that ordered it down, and they ended up taking it down.
I didn't know that.
And then probably your superintendent of police is backing the mayor because he obviously just got hired by her. So you have all these police officers. What does Christopher Columbus really fucking mean to you? Are you that prideful in Christopher? So turn around. So could you imagine if those police officers turned around and tore that statue down with those civilians? What that could have done for the city of Chicago, because it ended up getting removed by
like construction workers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or it's like down south with the Confederate monuments and shit like that down there. Like they have no history right now. Like that, it only lasted like 4 years, and yet they build these statues everywhere.
That logic is so backwards to me.
Exactly.
It's the Nazi logic.
Technically, that was a different country.
Those statues.
We don't fly the Nazi flag. Yeah. We don't have statues of a Hitler.
Germany don't fly the Nazi flag, bro.
Why the fuck?
They're disgusted by everything that went on.
They're literally embarrassed. They forbid anyone by talking about it. It's literally a punishable offense in Germany.
Sense.
Those monuments were put there in the mid 1900s by like white
intimidation
supremacists. It was white supremacists put that shit up because they want to commemorate the South in the 4 fucking
you
years
guys
ago.
are gonna remember what happened.
What
Type shit.
It's like the South gonna
Can
rise.
you imagine
again.
how offensive that is to be a black soldier and you're on a
Right.
base named after a Confederate general?
Right.
Fuck you guys.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's like all these bases down south are named after the Confederate generals. It's like we want to rename them. It's like, what are you gonna do? Like,
What I was just thinking real quick is, so the system in which you work in, like police force wise, and the person you are, like if you were a very like just like play the middle of the field, but you work in a corrupt department, you're gonna be pushed a certain way,
You're
right?
gonna get corrupted.
But guess what? If you work at someone who like at a department that's like very good, like well rounded, but you're a piece of shit, that's still gonna come out too. You know what I mean? So like you could have a shitty police force, you could just have a person. You can't stop a person who is racist and is pushing their own agenda as a cop.
So
Yeah.
Unless you weed that out.
Better
yeah,
screening.
right. Of course, that's what I'm saying.
So
Yeah.
let me throw a wrench into this, okay? Do you think that corrupted police forces, or not even a force, you can't even just necessarily say a whole force is corrupted, but do you think those individual corrupted officers, do you think that's due to systemic racism?
Systemic
Put in
the
place,
police force, or-
put in place, not by the police, but put in place by our rules and regulations by the people above.
Yes.
No.
absolutely, especially if it's down
Yes.
south.
Okay, now
Yes.
wait. Now this is great because we have a little bit of a disagreement here. Okay, I want to explain for two reasons. One, because I think Terrance might agree, and two, to shed some light and to maybe open up your mind into why we think this way.
Real quick, I was gonna say my first snap reaction was no. Like I would say both, but I have my reasoning for saying no, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would hope you wouldn't say no and not have a legitimate
Right,
reason.
right. But like, my first answer was no, but that doesn't mean that I don't think the same like aspect. You know what I'm saying? The reason I say no is strictly because I feel like, obviously, systematic,
You
but
probably feel like it comes down to
environmental.
the individual person that.
it's their environment they grew up in, parenting, who they were around, who they learned
That's
from,
part of
etc.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I agree. I agree with that, especially when you look at people from. I don't mean to. I guess you could say pinpoint a location or an area, but people from the south.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you have a
Exactly.
racist bastard cop and he changed other cops, they're probably gonna end up racist bastards. But if you have like a cop who hasn't have a background on that, there's a good chance that they're gonna be better off. Down
So,
the road.
What
Let
I
me-
think
let me-
Steven is asking is like they pass certain laws that are more geared towards minority groups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Who's enforcing those laws? The cops.
Right.
So they might not know that they're doing it per se, but
yeah.
Not
They're
only
doing
that, Terrance, and just to broaden this up and to maybe shine some perspective, and even into your mind, I feel like the systemic racism is even deeper than the police upholding those laws. I think it comes down to when you look at the city of Chicago and you look at the South Side, for example. Okay, it is very segregated.
The whole
It is
city is
it is
segregated.
it is not integrated very well.
Drive 10
It
minutes,
is
you're in a
literally
whole
like
different neighborhood.
exactly it goes from a very white neighborhood.
Mexican
To a
you're
very
Little
Mexican
Italy, now you're
neighborhood.
in Chinatown.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these African Americans don't have the fair resources that all of these other people in a lot of these other areas have. And I'm not saying it's all areas of African American pockets,
Mostly
but most inner city
poverty-stricken
areas, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Those kids don't have an opportunity. Those kids that grow up into adults someday don't have an opportunity for the same education in a sense of. I mean, I went to a private school for 2 years. I know a lot of those kids can't do that. Granted, I might have been able to afford that because my mom passed away and I got a little bit of money. But is that because that's my privilege? You get what I'm saying?
Before you even get to education, some of these kids aren't eating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
They can't even worry about school because mom and dad have to go to work.
Yeah.
They got to stay back, take care of brother and sister. So are they even getting to school? Maybe not, because they got to worry about home first. Home is so fucked up.
And
they
then-
got to handle that first.
And that's where you start getting these teenagers that say, I need to make a quick dollar. So I'm going
Yep.
to jump into a gang, or I'm going to jump into drugs, or hey, Lil Jojo down the street knows X, Y, and Z. If you go talk to them, he could hook you up here, whatever the case is. and then you start getting a circulation of trouble.
That's exactly the systemic thing you're talking about. It's built like that.
So, and that's where
It's been like that since probably the
that's
80s.
where I'm shedding the light on, because they're essentially forced into survival,
Yeah,
and
from,
their
like, first
survival is everything we just mentioned,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is all what you mentioned, illegal actions that the police are forced to uphold.
Yep.
So if these people get an equal opportunity, they leave their areas, or we can invest money to make those areas better. What do you think would happen?
Crime would definitely go down, and we would have better policing.
I think
You would need less policing because you have more other resources. The kids can go see a counselor. They can go see a drug abuse counselor. Go to a mental health counselor.
stuff that they can't even do now.
Exactly. Most of the calls police get called to, when they get there, the crime's done. So they're just reacting. So instead of reacting, we need to be proactive. Yeah, and stop it before it happens. Better education, better resources, after school programs, that type shit.
So Jay, after we mentioned that, where's your opinion now? Because I feel like with shedding that, it definitely opens perspective.
Oh yeah. I'm not ignorant to any of that information. I mean, I definitely would say both now. I'd say 60-40.
I would agree in like those areas, like how we talked about earlier, where it might be because of culture and where you're raised and why they raised you that way. Like talking about the older generation, right?
I guess like a big thing for me, like that's all factual stuff. I guess like kind of like a question for you guys too. Like obviously there's a problem, it needs to be addressed, but at what point? They're starting behind the 8 ball, but it's like at a point I feel like it's
we don't have a pull stick right now.
Right. Right, yeah. At some point, like, I feel everyone can be successful, and like at some point we're all responsible for our own selves to better our own selves. I'm saying obviously there's no reason for certain people to be starting behind everyone else. It could be adjusted. I guess just like in my perspective is like everyone to some point will go through a struggle to where like, all right, I'm in a shitty situation. Am I going to sulk in this or like, let me try and make this better? You know?
Jump on that point, Jerry, is, I definitely understand kind of what you're saying, and, everybody kind of, not everybody, but somebody kind of goes through something and it kind of gives them a moment or boost or some type of motivation or whatever the case is. But I want to share with you that there are a lot of different perceptions of what success is.
Very true. Yeah.
Success to me could be a job that pays $35,000 a year with benefits, and I'm able to buy a nice little condo in the suburbs or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Right.
Yeah.
Somebody who got forced in the trap, their version of success might be, I'm moving ounces, I'm doing this, I'm making this amount of money for my family, right? I'm cruising around, I just picked up a new, Mercedes C300, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
If that's successful to them, who are we to essentially tell them that they're wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Facts.
We live in such a an open capitalist country, an open market capitalist country. But they're going to regulate things that African Americans are doing.
Usually, most common black people start.
It's the fucked up truth. It's sad, and that's what I'm saying. Drugs and make $100 million a year and be 3% with my own.
Yeah.
Found of like having like all these parties who are like, they're like still.
You a little bit of professional about to. What is your thought with peace? I mean, you range rifles, even shotguns.
No, none of that.
Either have understand it a lot better than I think all of us at this table. And go ahead. Oh, I was going to say it's a huge of of everything circulating around us as well.
Of course, we're Right. So I think a lot of these laws, they're kind of back in other states as opposed to where you have to do like a lot of barely go in there and fill the Texas. You can walk there so long as you have all the right paperwork. You can walk out with an AR-15 day.
Yeah.
When it comes to how you mean by like between civilians and police officers, like what should there be?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking because, a lot of that crime that's involved specifically in our city is gun-related, drug-related, or pretty much domestic-related.
Right.
And so go ahead.
A lot of what you said, like a state like Indiana, like a lot of their laws are a little bit more laxed. Like they could sell to someone and not really check their background at all. So what a lot of these like ghost guns, I guess you could say, or whatever guns that end up on the streets over here, some of them do come from Indiana. Actually, quite a few of them do. Because what people will do, they'll go over there, go to like a gun show, buy a bunch of them, and then, bring them here to distribute. Now, if we had stricter gun laws, that would help the situation. But the problem is that there's so much funding for like NRA and USCCA that's probably not going to happen because Republicans love their guns. Come on now, let's just be honest.
So, do you think that's contributing to the systemic racism then? Because it's that easy for someone to go buy guns and then redistribute it out into the streets, which essentially then turns around and gets these people in trouble.
I feel like people are going to do what they want to do no matter what you say. Like it goes back to that guy that you mentioned, or just like your hypothetical mention of that guy who goes and traps and gets $100,000 a month and shit. Like they're gonna go do that no matter what you do. The problem is if you limit the laws on all the gun owners, like the good gun owners, then how are they gonna be able to fight back all these people that don't want to listen to the laws and want to have that stuff anyway? You know what I mean?
I guess the whole point would be is that there would be less of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not necessarily saying it would take care of the problem. If you legalize something like, for example, marijuana, that didn't necessarily take care of the problem. It just decriminalized it in a sense. You know what I'm saying? So it essentially helped out a lot of the incarceration and ticketing and everything else from the city because of that law passing. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm trying to ask. Like, Joe Schmo might be making $100,000, right? But what if he can only go out and purchase, a Glock or something, or not a Glock, a pistol, and maybe, he has to have it a certain amount of time before he can go up to the next level or whatever the case is. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe they limit a certain amount of guns you could buy in the span.
Having levels to the shit is what you're saying?
Yeah, like you essentially have to prove that you can handle owning a gun, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Like, for example, you bought a gun, you didn't go out and start fucking shooting people.
Fuck no, dude. That's insane.
Like, would you, Brian, would you support that? Like, levels to it? Like, you could go start with a pistol. Like, you could still go buy a gun.
Personally, I feel like it would be recommended, or should be kind of recommended, that people go to a class at least to learn about it first, because there's a lot of people who, like, they could be the smartest person in the world, but as soon as you put a firearm in front of them, they turn into like a third grader and they have no idea what they're doing.
Right, or like even like people, like most genius people, like driving a car, like it should be a like process that you do go through a class and like get extensive like training on everything in regards to it.
And in some countries there actually is stuff that people have to do in classes that they have to take before they're even able to have it. There's even like stricter laws of like how they have to have it stored, it has to be locked up, has to have a gun lock on it, and all this other stuff. So those countries tend to do have less crimes when it comes to those kinds of things.
That is
because
factual.
of how regulated that it is. Unfortunately, in this country that we live in, dude, there's so many guns per capita per like household, is that it's going to be so hard if you start regulating it to
Because
get a
they already
grip on
have it,
what's
is what
already
you're
out
essentially
there.
saying,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Because trust me, man, no one's gonna want to give up their rifle that they paid $600, $700, $800 for. Like that's a little insane. Now, if you grandfather those people in, that could help them. But then for future owners, they're not going to have those same.
That's what I was gonna
freedoms.
say. What if we just started with the generation, grandfather everybody else in the past, and then start obviously, making it a little bit harder of a process to obtain a gun. That's actually not a bad idea, Brian.
That would be a decent idea.
What about
But, like I said,
updating the Second Amendment? Because when they wrote that shit, obviously.
I mean, if
They
you
have
make that
muskets.
argument, you can make that argument
For
for
everything.
every single
Okay.
amendment.
I mean, it was written a long ass.
But I don't want to veer too far off of that. I don't, because we could talk about politics and amendments and everything else all day long. Because
I mean, you
But
guys
you
can call
said-
me a conspiracy theorist.
but
I'll
you
go
said
get
you-
my tinfoil hat. I think that the government plants not all, a lot of the guns in inner cities.
That's kind of like how the
God, how
the
they
CIA,
did crack, how they
that's
did
like
drugs.
the CIA with the drugs and shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not too far. They've done it before.
Yeah.
it's going to be a higher concentration of it just because of the
Because
population. in the
some of
city.
the stuff that they have in the city, where the
Is that your
fuck are
theory?
they getting that from?
was that your theory that you were talking about?
Yeah.
And well, that's
Because
what I'm
even
telling
like
you.
if you watch a video of
But
the
if
shooting in
Brian-
Chicago, that shit sounds like Iraq. Like where are they getting those guns?
Yeah.
You
But
can't get that in Indiana. They're getting
Right.
them. I think they're getting them from these seizes, and then they just recycle them.
Brian, can I go buy an AR-15 in Indiana?
I think you can.
Right now,
Yes.
no.
So
You need a Floyd.
okay. Let's
Well, if you
let's
have
say in a
the paperwork.
perfect world I had a Floyd. Could I go to Indiana right now and buy a gun? An AR-15,
Probably, yeah.
specifically an AR-15.
You could get that in Illinois too.
So I know, but I guess that's true. But can I buy a mass amount of them? Let's say I want to go in and buy 10 of them.
They probably think you're up to something.
But
They-
what,
Think about it. We were
beyond-
just talking about how there's not a lot of resources in the city.
So when you
Most of these people
when you
work in
actually go
minimum
to
wage
purchase
jobs.
those, when
They
you
have
actually go to
extra money to
purchase
buy guns.
in Illinois.
Yeah.
There's a form that, so when you go actually go and purchase a form in Illinois, like there's actually a limit to the amount that you could even purchase at one time.
Yeah, yeah.
So like you can't go out there and you can't like purchase fucking 15 AR-15s, 20 shotguns, and like 40 Glocks. You just can't do that.
So where are the
Like
guns coming from?
it's limited to I think it's about 4 that they could do.
And it's not even like a Glock. It's like they have some heavy shit. They have fully automatic
yeah.
weapons. Like where?
Nah,
The whole game,
man,
the whole game with AKs.
Everybody is like,
Yeah.
where did you get that?
Well, the thing is like with those like fully automatics that you're talking about, like those are class 3 licenses. So like those people went and got more. It's kind of like if you were to get a concealed carry, but it's like a higher level of a form of gun ownership, and only certain states allow that.
Oh shit.
Like, well, one of them is like Colorado, the other one's like Texas. You can have that. But like, it's really hard to get those licenses, and there's a waiting period of a few months to get those on, I believe, on some of
But-
them.
It sounds like you need a lot of time and a lot of money
Oh, yeah.
to get those weapons.
Oh yeah.
Which
Oh, yeah.
we've established that.
Right, but you
It's
also
hard to come by in inner cities.
Yeah, you also got to think though. There's corruptness in everything. There's probably people that have hookups where they make a phone call and have 30 AKs in 4 hours. You know what I mean? Like
For
there's
free?
not for free, but
No,
drug
you
money.
said
We're
that's what I'm
talking about
saying.
$100,000 in a year off drugs. Like they have people
They
can find
have
ways to
to
get
afford
things
it,
done.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right. If you're like carting around like drugs and shit like the cartel, you can afford that shit.
yeah.
You got no problem trying to find the weapons.
I mean, the thing about Chicago, they'll always crack down on the drugs.
No matter
Yeah.
what you
Yeah,
do,
If they crack down anything, it's definitely gonna be the drugs. Fuck the guns.
yeah,
Let's
no
go
matter
get the
what you
drugs.
do,
That makes
so long as there's someone willing to buy it, there's always going to be someone willing to sell it.
Yeah.
Like no matter what you do,
so what about decriminalizing it then? Is that just as much as a solution?
decriminalizing what?
Or maybe not decriminalizing it, but making it an easier process.
An
get it
easier
done?
process.
So you can't.
Easier?
I don't
No,
personally,
we need to
I don't
go
think
harder.
It should be an easier
Because
process at all.
if you look at
Yeah, mass
Texas
shooting almost every day with
and
what we have
people
now.
and people down in Texas and they give their argument I'm carrying my rifle
I'm
with me.
protecting mine.
So
yeah.
if somebody comes out here, I'm just gonna fucking put a load in their ass. You know what I'm
My
saying?
property, get off my property.
You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I feel like a lot of that in Texas is that since that's a state that so many people own firearms, that you kind of got to be dumb to try something there. Like,
I mean, to be fair,
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is like if we had like open carry, concealed carry,
I feel like Texas
the crime rate would go up a little bit, but that would be the idiots like
who just
dying
shoot
off.
off like nothing.
In this
No,
state,
Yeah.
like that would be the people. Like if I didn't know Steven had a gun and I ran up in his house and he blew me away,
that's what I'm
that's
saying.
that's my fault.
No, not all the time, though.
It would spike up, but then it would go down and it would stay down
would
because
level
people
out.
like, all right, I don't know if he has a gun. Like he might blow my shit back.
That's the
Yeah.
crazy thing, though. But if you're not directly threatened, like if a dude doesn't have a weapon, he drunkenly strolls into your house.
Then,
The
yeah,
laws
then
are
he's-
weird,
then
dude.
he's just
Because you'd be like,
spraying.
"Whoa, dude's in my house, bang, shot in the
That's
face."
right.
And then
Yeah.
you catch a charge. You catch a murder charge for someone trespassing. Like,
Or if you like get like some like ticked off by some like stupid petty shit, and they just blow you away and call
Yeah,
someone.
it would
fast.
definitely- it would definitely go up for a little bit.
You and Marianne.
well, it goes. It
Sleeping?
turns
That's how
into
you're gonna react. And you got a gun.
Right.
I'm pulling the gun out.
Yeah,
like those
100%.
idiots that you're talking about that you guys are referring to. That's like play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
I mean, you could just be drunk
You're
and
gonna try to
like
rob somebody
Jason
in a
just
state that you
walking around
know
him.
very well. A lot of people own firearms, and you try to break into their house, you're probably gonna get your shit blown.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's the solution then in terms of handling that portion of crime?
Gun violence?
Yeah.
There's always gonna be those idiots, dude.
Nobody's gonna give up their
It's
guns.
murky.
Removal or nothing. I feel like there's no.
It's never really a clear solution to it, man. It's like that's why all of these
like the
topics and
coronavirus.
all of these things have to be spoken about in the middle. Like it always is like, oh, one side wants more gun control, one side wants less gun control, but it's like, how about just reform?
I think maybe
How
have a
about-
limit.
How about just, going about making the laws that we have better? Like, not necessarily making it harder, making it worse, but like maybe like, hey, dude, you got to take a class to learn how to put it together, shoot and stuff like that. And that way, if you're already in a system and you do commit a crime with whatever firearm you have, they're already going to have a track on you. So that's going to be able to weed it out a lot easier. I feel, at least.
How do you feel about like limiting the number of guns people can own?
Limiting the number of guns you can own?
Yeah,
I
'cause
mean,
there's people out
that
there
would
with
be
like
a step
20
too.
assault rifles. Like, why?
What's the point of having
Why
those?
do you need those?
Personally, I don't feel the need to have like 20 assault rifles. I think that's a little over excessive.
A little.
But
then-
yeah.
But then
But
they're
then
like,
again,
whoa,
like-
it's my right. It's like, all right,
Yeah,
there's limits to
exactly.
everything.
Look up the percentage of
But, like, if you go to-
Chicago.
Like how California, they just
Like,
imposed the
with
new
the
ban
faster
on
gun
stuff
count.
right now. And like they still have issues. Like right now in like California, you can't have more than 10 rounds in your mag. Your AR-15 has to have a certain component on the hand grip for it so that it doesn't make it a illegal rifle. But like those laws also are going to hinder the good people as well. It's a double-edged sword, man. It's just a double-edged sword. Now, limiting the amount of guns that people have, I think that would be a good step.
Okay, I'm gonna tailor this back into
Black Lives Matter.
to
Because now we're going into like a whole different topic.
No, and I
You're
understand.
on BLM, and
I understand, but the whole point of talking about the gun control was to talk about how that contributes to crime and how that contributes to systemic racism. Because we know a lot of the big things that contribute to those are, like we said, guns, drugs, and then the natural situations that these African American people are placed in, essentially. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of why I wanted to tailor in that direction, because this ties right back into the policing. You hear people, records amount of people getting shot and killed every single day in our city. Where are the police officers? What are they doing? That was the whole point of that. You know what I'm saying? How can we control the gun crime and adequately have them do their job better? Do you get where I was trying to go with that?
Yeah.
But having like, you can only have so many police. It's like you can't have guys standing on every corner. Like if I got a gun
That's
and
what I
you're
was just
2 houses
thinking,
down, like I walk in there, pop you. You can't control that.
So then that draws directly into defunding the police.
I mean, we would want the cops to respond to gun calls, right?
Absolutely.
Personally, I don't think we should necessarily defund, because that's going to take away money from training these cops.
Yeah, it's gonna be used in different ways.
Because, like, I'm all for, like, okay, like, you don't want to militarize police.
I'm allowed to finish.
Like, okay, I get that. But then you can't really defund the cops, because then how the heck are they going to go around stopping these bad guys if they don't even have enough body armor to go around for each other?
I don't think.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't think, Ryan, when they talk about defunding the police, I don't think they necessarily mean cutting salaries, cutting benefits, cutting the amount of training, cutting, those types of things. I think they more so look at, I guess you could say, like the inefficiencies in the budget, things that they spend money on that they no longer need to spend,
Yes.
things that they can reallocate in different directions. Because the police
Their job
Police
is
are
crazy.
funded by taxpayers.
The cops respond to everything. A crazy dude in the street, who do you call?
Yeah.
The cops.
Right.
Even though he's probably just having a mental break or something,
Yeah.
a mental episode. Cops aren't trained for that. They're not mental
Right.
experts.
They're not really trained for mental...
Exactly. So instead of calling the cops, why not call 911 and they send a mental health expert to that call?
Right.
As long as he's not violent. If he's just like pacing in the middle of the street, send a mental health expert.
We also don't want to have.
Well, what if
free-for-all.
that person turns violent though?
You could have a cop go with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could have a cop escort that expert.
So how do you, as an individual, as a voter, as someone in Congress, how do you decide what to efficiently cut and reallocate?
You don't need another police helicopter.
I mean,
Joliet has fucking tanks. What
do you need tanks for?
exactly?
Joliet?
In Joliet, you don't
when's
need
the last time Joliet used them?
exactly. You don't need those.
It's
It's
like
more like
Texas
social
shit, you don't
infrastructure.
Chicago just closed the hospital down. They could have kept the hospital open if they moved some of the police.
So
cars to-
you think utility items like vehicles definitely
that's the big. How long?
should be cut.
It's like
you
you're
have
a car guy. How long do police drive those cars? Like 2 years, and they beat the shit out of them. And then they get new cars every other year.
Every like 4 or 5 years they replace their fleet.
You can keep those cars for 5 years. Just maintenance them.
Right. Or like
You don't need a top of the line
Ford
Ford
Expedition.
Explorer SUV every year.
You could essentially also, it would probably be cheaper too, in a sense to, they could have kept partnerships alive with Ford and Chevy in terms of the Capris that they were rolling out, or the Impalas, or the Crown Vics. Because those cars were very solidly built. They were built to last. They were built to get the crap beat out of them. They were literally built to
hop curbs.
ram other cars. Like,
They're literally made for police officers, like designed.
And they got rid of them.
it would that's a great point, Terrance, because it would probably be cheaper to maintain those vehicles, even if you have 100,000 miles on a Crown Vic, 150,000 miles
That's
on a Crown
nothing.
Vic. You're gonna pay $1,000, $2,000 to put a brand new motor in it if it blows, instead of paying $30,000 or plus per Tahoe, per whatever you're purchasing, times however many you need it.
That would lead to a lot less police killings too, because they wouldn't be as stressed,
But it does seem
and they
like,
would know how to handle the situations better. A lot of cops are just killing people with mental health issues.
Yeah, quick
because
question
they
though.
don't know how to
the
solve it.
defund the police thing seems directly correlated with the systematic racism, like Black Lives Matter. Like, do you feel like that's directly correlated, like defunding the police, or do you think it's more of just
It
like
is
a
actually
It
correlated
started
because
it started
defunding-
now, but like when Black Lives Matter, nobody's really talking about defunding the police. That's like
Mhm.
really recently people
That's
started talking about
yeah.
defund, but they're correlated. They're right next to each other.
How do you feel like they're correlated?
I feel like they're I mean, I had to jump in and interrupt
Go
you,
ahead,
Terrance,
go
but I feel like it's a direct correlation because nobody was calling to defund the police until, I hate to say it, until George Floyd happened. until then, I have never heard that phrase in my
didn't.
whole
I
entire
never heard it
25
until
years of
April.
existence.
Right, but I'm generally curious
saying, like,
why
how
you
are
think they're
they-
correlated.
how are
How
they-
are they correlated?
How do you
I don't
feel
know.
like
Well,
the
most
funding-
of those resources would go back to the inner city.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, they
like
go
social
back to the
infrastructure.
minority population.
Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
I say the same thing, and you know, that's
We don't know what would happen until we try. So you
Need
can't like the
facilities.
funding won't work.
Yeah.
We haven't tried.
But here's the thing, though. You can't just, oh yeah, we gave it the good old try.
You
type
have to
deal.
like actually.
You have. This
Watch
is
out.
something.
Yeah.
This is something that you have to put in decades
It
worth.
didn't happen overnight, so you're not gonna fix it
Decades
overnight.
worth of planning.
Yeah.
So, those students that are currently in school, that might be already at that threshold. Let's say 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and they're already forced into that survival mode.
Yeah.
It might be almost at the point of no return for them
Mm-hmm.
because the funding wouldn't drop in magically by the time the next school year comes around.
18 when it comes.
But this is almost for
It's for the It's not for millennials. It's not for Gen Z. It's for the kids in elementary school now.
exactly.
Kind of like how our grandparents, well, my grandparents, had to like march and like rally. Your grandparents probably did rally for civil rights. That didn't affect them because they were a lot older, but it got passed down to our parents and us.
Right.
They might not have seen those benefits, but they knew that, all right, we're fighting for something bigger. So that's kind of what's going on now. Like,
Yeah,
honestly,
that kinda goes
I
into,
don't think if, like, recently a lot of white people have been rallying with Black Lives Matter. So that's, I feel like, why it's gotten so much momentum. Because it's been around for a while, and it was just only black people. Like, when other demographics jumped in, it started picking
It's
up
like a
more
system.
momentum.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When Colin Kaepernick kneed and I ran to his defense, my sister, who's a
Probably
cop, unfriended me.
Drug
Oh, wow.
on Facebook, probably.
I got dragged through the dirt. Terrance, I can't even remember how many friends I had to remove. And not because I wasn't prideful enough to argue with them, but just because I couldn't align myself with people in that nature. And I'm glad, in a sense, that looking in 2020, a lot of those people that I did choose to remain friends with for personal reasons, a lot of them have changed their views for the better. I'm not necessarily saying it's 110% aligned, to what Colin Kaepernick was doing or whatever the case is, but it seems like they're a little more tolerable to what he did and they understand more why he did it.
I have no problem with people like that. Like, you found out that you were wrong, you changed your opinion.
Right. Or
Good. That's what everybody should
Right,
do. I
or
have my
just-
problem with the people who
That's more of what we need is those people
who
that you could kind of talk to them and then eventually maybe see the light in another way, because a lot of people, they only want stuff to change when it affects themselves.
right, or just simply, even if you disagree, just being sensitive and understanding of someone else's opinion on something, and it's
literally
something,
what we have to teach
Right.
kids
Yeah.
in school. I disagree,
Yeah.
but and then
Yeah.
you say it in a nice
Yeah.
way. It's adults that can't do
Yeah,
that.
I'm right. Adults are the most stubborn. I feel like.
Like, be sympathetic for the other person. Like,
Yeah.
put yourself in their shoes.
It's the whole thing with
And
coronavirus. I don't have it.
So Terrance, let me
It's not
ask you a question. Just kind of as we're winding down, we're running out of time here, and I do want to ask a few more questions that are, I guess you could say, Caucasians are kind of scared to ask African Americans. What do you genuinely feel when you are with white people, when you're working with white people, when you confront them? Obviously, you're our friends and everything else like that, but what's your general perspective of, let's say, just some random other white person that's not someone you correlate with?
So like a random person.
Yeah, like a random white
I
person.
mean,
you just happen to pass by him walking in a store, and he just maybe
I'm
you
gonna
guys
treat
glanced
you
at
like-
each other, and that's it.
I'm gonna treat you like normal until you give me a reason not to.
Same.
And I'm gonna treat you
Yeah.
like you're not a racist until you show me that you're a racist.
That's how everyone should go about it.
Do you feel like that's something that lingers in the back of your mind, though? Like, is that something
Yeah, I mean,
where you're
I
like,
definitely have like. It's gonna sound crazy, but like I have a look of a white person where I can kind of gauge, like, oh, he might
Be a little
call
like
me.
a
Cool,
sixth
yeah.
sense? Like
He
a
might
sixth
call
sense?
me like boy and tell me not to come here at night or some shit like that. But like like Sixth Sense, I guess you would call it. Sometimes I've been wrong though, and I've been shocked. Like, oh, you're not. You're not a racist at all.
Does it ever make you uncomfortable? Like when you get that sixth sense?
Fam, I worked in Naperville Central.
He said, "Fam."
This is the only black male on the staff. There was one black lady, 2 other black ladies.
We'll talk about that experience. We got a couple minutes left. Talk about it.
It wasn't terrible. I mean, they're older white women, so they were probably.
That's a lot of info. It's just a lot of women.
Yeah.
Because I went to the schools till like 7th grade, and it was most of the staff was just like you said, old white women.
Yep.
Do you feel like you have had every opportunity to succeed in your lifetime?
I do. I mean, I've been middle class my whole life.
Yeah.
That's because of my parents, but my parents didn't. My grandparents didn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's only right that I would because
Yeah,
they
they
know
put in the work.
Yeah, they know what moves to make their next generation better.
They paved the road for you, essentially.
Basically, yeah.
Do you feel for, the other African Americans then that don't have that?
100%. I mean, you have to. That's part of the reason I became a teacher. It's like, all right, there's other role models besides an athlete or a rapper
Absolutely.
or a celebrity. There's other ways to like be positive that aren't on TV. That isn't a doctor. That isn't a lawyer. The typical what they teach you in school.
So as a black man, Terrance, how do you maybe not expect white people to react, but how do you kind of, expect them to deal with these issues moving forward, these racial issues moving forward? Or how would you like to see them handle it? Maybe say what you would expect and then maybe, how you would like to see it.
I mean, I kind of spoke up on it earlier when I said the Black Lives Matter is gaining momentum because white people joined. So help advocate, be an ally.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it. I mean, if you can get out and rally with people, do it. If you can post on social media, do it. I mean, if you're comfortable with it, whatever. Or do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Just try to see the other side because I don't know what other demographics go through because I'm black and that's it. I've been black my whole life. So.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself building a relationship or eventually trusting the police again as an individual black man? Especially,
I don't know. If I leave your house and go get pulled over, I don't know.
Maybe not right now, but I'm talking maybe 5 years from now. Let's say there's a lot more.
It depends on what they do. If they show that they want to improve, then sure. But if they don't change, especially after this early year, 2020 is still pretty young, and we've had so much happen. So if nothing comes out of all this, then fuck no, I'm not changing the way I feel.
And one thing I noticed, compared to other years, it seems like everything that's going, all the situations, this isn't blowing over.
It's not going anywhere. People are still rallying.
Directly,
it's not going anywhere.
Nothing's gonna change.
Nope. It's crazy because people are rallying against police brutality, and the cops are beating people up at these anti-police brutality rallies. I'm like, don't you know that you're on tape?
Yeah. So, to what extent though do you feel like looting, rioting, etc., things like that? Do you think that should continue to go on?
If it happens, it happens. I mean, I don't feel bad for big corporations because they're gonna lie and they're gonna come out on top.
Well, dude, you kind of gotta figure too is that a lot of these places that are getting looted, a lot of them are family-owned businesses.
The mom and pop shops, I feel bad for.
Right.
Like that's messed up.
But Target.
It's sad.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
sad that the looting. What happens is that then the looting and the rioting, it takes a hold of the full picture, and that's all people see instead of just the protesting.
It's just
when people hear, and then on top of that, when people hear Black Lives Matter, they say, oh, all lives matter. Well, they're not. Black Lives Matter isn't saying that all lives do not matter. They're just saying Black Lives Matter too, just as much as everybody else's life, just as much as blue lives matter, just as much as everyone else's lives matter. Black Lives Matter too. So people need to get it out of their head that just because people are saying Black Lives Matter, that they just
I mean,
are saying
they
that
feel the
it's
need
just
to
black
say
lives
it
that matter.
there was a
Because
time
really-
when black people were property and not people. They
Yes.
didn't even count black
Right.
people as
That is
humans.
factual.
They were
Even in the-
3/5
Even
of
in the
a person.
military, like World War
Right,
II.
you know?
Yeah.
So of course we have to say Black Lives Matter because there's laws and there's history that shows that Black lives
Are behind
didn't
it.
matter.
Yep.
At one
Right.
point in history, yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we guys are officially out of time. I do want to say thank you to Terrance for being here today and answering a lot of these questions that I feel like the community needs to know, and a lot of other white people need to know. Just because generally I feel like these questions are not typically asked from our African American counterparts. So I feel like a lot of light was definitely shed today on how, I guess you could say, your general African American man feels in this United States of America that we live in. So I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in today and listened to everything that went down. I'm your host again, Steven, with Ryan, Brian, and Jerry, and Terrance was the guest. This is 4.5 Men. We'll see you guys next week.